Hey everybody, and welcome back to the EV Cafe Takeaway podcast, a podcast focused on that zero emission future that we all hope for. Every week I get joined by one of the wonderful team from the EV Cafe, and this week is no exception. I've got the lovely Sarah. Sazzy, how are you going?
I've been looking forward to this one. I have been waiting for it, and I've cleared my diary, so I'm looking forward to this chat.
Good, so we can chat all afternoon then.
Why not? Why not?
Brace yourselves, folks, because we have an innovator, a pioneer, and a collaborator, as we always do, on the EV Cafe Takeaway podcast. This lady has done so much in the last few years, and is really exciting that we've got an opportunity to talk to her. Her name is Jess Shanahan. Jess, welcome to the EV Cafe.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's our pleasure. There's a lot of things going on, and obviously you've just taken on, I think, a new role, which we'll no doubt get to in a second. But you've been in the market as a sort of a content provider or producer, journalist. Talk us through what do you do in a holistic way to this point today?
I mean, how long have you got?
About an hour.
Yeah. So the nice thing about my job, and I went self-employed in 2012, and that's really allowed me to just kind of follow what interests me. And for a long time, that was cars and automotive, and I've done a lot in motorsport. But in 2016, I did a 2,500 mile road trip all around the UK and Ireland in an EV, in a Kia Soul EV. And it was part of a press stunt for a hotel chain, but it was really my first taste of e-mobility, and I was hooked. It took me a little bit longer to get my own electric car, but from there I realized, this is the part of the automotive industry that I want to be in. So anything connected to mobility as a whole, but also the tech side of things and sustainability as well. So whether that's talking about sustainable road trips or eco travel and using an EV as part of that, or whether it's combating misinformation as a journalist, or whether it's working with, EV companies and anyone kind of within that value chain, that's kind of what I've dedicated myself to. And because that's what I'm passionate about, basically. And that kind of spills over into like climate tech and energy as well. But it's so essentially I'm doing anything that revolves around writing or creating content within that kind of e-mobility space.
Perfect. And I mean, quite clearly something grabbed you. So the vehicle, and I've driven the Kia Soul, not the greatest looker, but actually...
it's an acquired taste, Paul. It's an acquired taste. Yeah, I like that one.
I think that's fair. But I mean, from the back... there's not a lot going for it. It has to be said. The front, I think, is kind of funky, but anyway. But what was it that grabbed you about this e-mobility and sustainable space? What was the trigger, do you think, that caught you?
Yeah, so I think originally when I was doing this road trip, it was the pace of travel. So, I think the stated range on the 2016 Kia Soul EV was about 100 miles, but we were maybe getting 80 to a charge. And, we were trying to do hundreds of miles, a day. We did it over 3 weeks in the end. But I just loved being essentially forced to stop and take a break every 80 or so miles, because it made me, I was able to discover new places. And it was we had really long days, but it was overall quite a relaxing experience because, I wasn't driving for 4 hours at a time. It was maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours maybe. So I really, really enjoyed that. But I'm quite a techie person. I love technology. And kind of as I experienced more EVs following that, it was kind of the tech side that really grabbed me. So in line with, my own values on sustainability and that kind of thing, it was like, well, this is obviously the perfect thing for me to be into and for me to dedicate the continuation of my career to.
Just makes
Brilliant.
such sense. And I know that car so well. 2016 is much before me. 2017 was when I got to drive a few of those. And you're absolutely right. There was this, well, Paul will remember this well. I came over to Millbrook Proving Ground, which is a good 3 hours drive. And it's about 90 miles, but it was really not very nice weather. And there's only one rapid charger that I could have used and it wasn't working. So I essentially pretty much didn't really make it. I turned up for about an hour and a half, and that was then. It's not even that long ago. Whereas now I don't even plan my journey. I just drive there for the event. It was only a couple of weeks ago. And I love that you experienced that beautiful feeling where when you're charging, do something else. That's a wonderful opportunity to kind of make that clear to anybody thinking about going EV. I actually last week, I think you're like this, Jess, as you are what I would consider a sort of a true strategist. You take something that people don't necessarily understand, you translate it and present it in a way that people do, and you work out a plan as to how to do that, whether it's this hotel chain tour that you did. But in this instance, I've coined it. You get software as a service platforms and lots of other platforms. I'm looking for somebody to do something fun with. Charging as a pleasure, CAAP, charging as a pleasure platform. So when you are geolocated at your charger, it knows where you are and it says, oh, did you know there's a wonderful footpath over here that leads to a coffee shop should you wish to go for a wander at this time? Or there's a hot desk around the corner with Wi-Fi. That beautiful overlay of time. We have a phrase that Sam Clark coins, which is, I don't stop to charge, I charge because I've stopped. And that works really, really well on high-powered motorway service areas where you're going that way anyway, and it's a good time to stop for a recharge of both your body and your car. I wanted to know a bit more about this trip, because when you did that, there wasn't a lot of charging available. Are you talking predominantly very slow sort of AC charging? What did you encounter on your adventures?
No, it was mostly, DC rapids. It was when kind of the ecotricity electric highway was very much, in place. So I would say the majority of our stops were, service stations. But when we had longer stops, because we were meeting mayors and doing press and all of this kind of stuff, when we had longer stops, it was then we would go to a car park where there were AC chargers. So it was a real mix. And this was my first experience of driving an electric car. So it was a real kind of like almost baptism by fire, because I was really thrown into, right, go off and drive an electric car. And I thought, oh, cool, we'll get like 100, 120 miles. The first time I drove it back from like where I'd picked it up from, that was a real kind of learning curve, because I got, 80 miles away from home and I was like, I need to charge, and there are no chargers on this side of the A11 on the way home. So I had to do a 15-mile round trip at like 40 miles an hour, essentially to go back, get onto the other carriageway, and then drive back in the other direction to go to a charger. So there was a lot of that. But it was for the actual road trip itself, because after that, I've driven it home. It's a lot different to how I thought it was. The planning that went into it was very, very, very strict. And I would say the reliability of those chargers back then was maybe better than it has been, in years since. So we didn't actually have a lot of problems, but there was so much planning involved of like, which DC charger do we go to? And are we going to be somewhere long enough that we can get, a slower AC charge in before we have to do the next thing? Like meet the next mayor, get to a hotel, whatever it might be. So I learned so much about the charging process then. And I love this idea of, finding something to do while charging, because I planned all that. That's exactly what I did on this road trip. Like, I have to go to a car park and charge on the Jurassic Coast. Of course, I'm going to go fossil hunting. What else is there to do? I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to look at the sea. And it was wonderful.
Wonderful. Charging is a pleasure.
Yes.
Absolutely. And what a pleasure. Interesting that a lot of mayors wanted to see. I think I read somewhere that it was over 100 mayors that you got to speak to as you traipsed around the country.
Oh. It was maybe about 10 mayors.
Oh, right. Okay.
Over the just added a zero on.
Yeah. Added a zero. Are there that many mayors? We had 57 stops in different locations. Right. And probably about 20% of those had a mayor that wanted to come and look at the car and talk about it, which was really nice.
And what was it that triggered those interactions with the mayors? Was it the hotel chain themselves kind of reaching out, or did you reach out? How did that come about?
Yeah, so the agency that was doing this press campaign for the hotel chain, they organised meetings with mayors and photo shoots with journalists. And it actually, probably what you're thinking of is we achieved over 100 pieces of press coverage. So it could be that.
I knew there was 100 in there somewhere.
But yeah, it was, the people managing this PR campaign, they were very good at arranging these cool, interactions with people that would then be photographed and sent on. But, we had cool experiences. Like, I think it was the mayor of Southampton read us a poem about charging. If you ever need a restaurant recommendation, mayors are the people to go to because they know everywhere. We had some incredible restaurant recommendations. So yeah, it was quite a bizarre experience to have met so many mayors in like such a short amount of time, when I previously don't think I'd met any, and I'm not even sure I've met any since. So it was a really fun experience to be doing this as a press stunt that meant that we were meeting all of these cool people along the way.
Mayors are sort of like people of the community, aren't they? And they really, their political agenda is much less than some of the politicians around that we know. So that must have been why they were quite so nice.
Yeah.
But so let's fast forward to today, Jess. We mentioned at the top of the podcast that you've got a new role. You're gonna delve into an exciting new role. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I'm going to be a team principal of an electric scooter racing team as part of the e-scooter championship is what it's called. And this is quite new for me. So I used to run a race team, but it was I think it was a 1979 Porsche 924. So very, very different. And I've got a motorsport business and I still do a lot of stuff within traditional motorsport. And, that's not kind of wholly separate to what I do within e-mobility and sustainability. There are occasionally crossovers, certainly in terms of like how you deliver content. But this is a really, really good way to blend my experience in motorsport, because I've been working in motorsport since 2015, but also, my love for e-mobility. So it's racing riders, racing drivers who are racing these very, very high-powered electric scooters around urban racetracks all over the world. So I'm going to be the team principal of RM Electric, where the RM stands for my motorsport brand, Racing Mentor. So I'm really, really keen to get stuck in. It's still quite a new announcement, but the racing starts early next year, and we're going to some really cool places that I don't think I can announce yet. But this is like just such a cool, if anyone wants to look it up, the e-scooter championship. These things do like 60 miles an hour. It's more akin to like motorbike racing. They're leaning, it's just, it's a really exciting sport to watch. So I'm really, really like jazzed to be involved.
And they're on tracks, or are they going to be, because you mentioned urban. So, I mean, actually not road circuits, as it were, or are they?
Yeah, it's kind of like how Formula E does some of its races, in that they'll shot off a small part of like a city centre, and they'll like put up the sidings and stuff to turn it into a track. So they obviously need a lot less space when it's a scooter, but I'm not sure how it's going to work exactly. But it's cool that it's in an urban setting, because it's very much promoting e-scooters as a method of travel within, say, a city, but doing it in this fun way where, you get to watch them go at, breakneck speeds and, compete against each other, which is very cool.
Really want to see it myself. I think we need an EV cafe tour, Paul, and we'll go and see some of these.
I think so.
I'm yet to make it to Formula E. So as an e-mobility person myself, this is probably as exciting for me to go and see that. And I was thinking about this because how does people even begin to know that they could be an e-scooter racer? I mean, we're actually the opposite. You get de-restricted on any of the ones that you get to hire for your own mobility purposes. So where does one even go to train to do this sort of thing? More importantly, how did you stumble across the role? Did they approach you, I suspect?
So I've got a contact, Ellis from Elysium Racing, who is
good old Ellis. Yeah.
So he's also a team principal within the e-scooter championship, and I know Ellis quite well and his family, because we've worked together on different motorsport stuff, and because he kind of sits at the intersection of electric and motorsport. We've obviously been talking about this, and they said let me introduce you, and I was like, yeah, sure. And then I got talking to the organizers and went through the process to apply to be a team principal. So yeah, it was very much having the right contacts kind of thing.
Well, and yes, and there's always that phrase, isn't it? It's not what you know, it's who you know. But it does kind of help when there's both, both synergies there. And actually, I know Ellis because this time last year, I was very lucky to host him on a panel session at the London EV show. So 2023, time is flying by. And what really struck me about him was he's remarkably young, considering how much advanced career he's experienced. But the support from the family is a really big thing for him there. And as we always like to say on the EV Cafe, other good podcasts are available. And friend of the EV Cafe, Liz Allen, does one, and he was on that show. I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to it back, but it was the first time I'd really fully had insight into the different sort of cultural aspects of e-mobility racing. He talks a lot on that podcast about there is no sort of discrimination who you are or what your background is. Yeah. If you can pay, you can play. And I had no idea. But of course, the first person to drive through a wall is going to be disqualified if they can't then repair that wall and get their vehicle back on. How is that going to work with your racing? Because actually, the biggest thing is going to be kind of protecting the body, protecting the driver on this rider, on this crazy fast scooter. How's that going to work?
Yeah, so I think the safety stuff in place is very similar to motorcycle racing. So, they've got, very, very tough suits, all the usual kind of fire stuff. I think there's probably the same impact protection that a lot of motorcycle riders have in terms that, if you fall off your bike, even as like a road rider, some of them inflate and that kind of thing. So again, I don't know the specifics of that, but yeah, it's very similar to motorcycle racing in terms of the protections that the riders have. And yeah, it is riders, which me coming from a four-wheel motorsport background, have to get used to saying riders and not drivers.
Drivers, I know. And I've never wanted to try something more in my life. I hope this trickles down to kind of Funville, where norms like me can I'm riding motorcycles, so I could just wear my motorcycle gear and turn up and hire one of these beasts. EV Cafe outing, Paul?
Well, yeah, I mean, we've already done electric karting, which was a lot of fun, and I love it because having done petrol karting indoors often and even outdoors, you always get the fumes from the vehicle in front, which is probably why I always tried to get to the front, because then I didn't have to worry it. But then you're lapping people, and no, I'm bigging myself.
Yeah, lapping me. Let's just make that really clear. I was not good at karting.
So, Jess, this whole thing, does that mean that you have to find the riders, and so you're going out to the market? Is that the case, and how do you do that?
Yeah, so in other forms of motorsport, that is typically the case. The ESC e-scooter championship is slightly different in that they have a really cool like rider selection process, which I missed because I've come on board as a team principal a lot later. So there was a big event at a karting circuit in the UK where, all of the team principals came down. They got to watch the different riders that were already on board with the ESC doing their thing on track. There was a bit of testing, meeting the different people. So a lot of the riders were selected directly by their team principals. That's not the case for me. I've kind of been given mine. But that hasn't been announced yet in terms of who the riders are for RM Electric. But, I already know that I've got a good team. So, yeah, in traditional motorsport, it's a little bit different because it's all very monetary based. So it's in any other form of racing, it's usually like, who wants to pay to be part of my team? Unless we're, very, very like high level, got tons of sponsors, backed by a manufacturer maybe. So motorsport's a bit weird in that sense. But yeah, I've got riders. I didn't get to select them, but I'm very excited about who they are.
Well, I suspect when you select them next time, there might be someone we know. Maybe. We'll see. Hopefully. I was thinking carefully whilst you spoke about how I sort of came across you and got to know more about you. And something I think that you share, I'm so glad you came on the show, thank you, because something we try to do in the EV Cafe is to really promote that, what we call collaboration piece. So how do you take something that you want to communicate and leverage off somebody else or something else to make sure that message is communicated? And something we call this is profitable partnerships. Looking through, your social media posts, please do find Jess, follow, like, share. Because she does put out some really knowledgeable pieces that I think would inspire. And I liked it when you crept towards the 12,000 follower mark. And you really celebrated that. And of course, that's the natural thing to do. But I wanted to tap into your motivation. How do you know what is the right thing to say and when on a platform like LinkedIn? What can the listeners learn from your ability to communicate?
Yeah, so I think from my point of view, and everything that I've done, let's say over the last like 5 years, there's been a lot of trial and error. So like I've found on LinkedIn specifically, the things that work for my audience are aggressively combating misinformation about EVs. Like are very much like, this newspaper posted this, here's why they're wrong, with facts and data. So that works really well kind of from a storytelling point of view. But I've also found that the biggest thing for me on LinkedIn is telling some kind of personal story. So the theme or the moral of the piece doesn't necessarily have to be, this is something I did, but it's telling any kind of story that is maybe linked to EV misinformation, or people say that charging is difficult, but here's just a really easy journey I did where charging was not difficult. So I'm spreading this message essentially that charging is easy, but I'm tying it into the fact that I went on a road trip, for example, and it was easy to charge. I didn't even have to think about it. I maybe planned 1 or 2 stops that were in line with something that I wanted to do, and otherwise, didn't have to worry about it. And I would say the other thing is celebrating personal milestones. Now I used to be quite bad at doing this. I'm like, who wants to hear from me when I do something cool? But I've kind of had to get over that. Yeah. See, people do, but for ages I was like, nah, no one cares. But actually, the more I've done it, the more I've realized those are the posts that do well, because I think maybe this is an echo chamber thing of, those 12,000 odd people that follow me are like me and are interested in the same things as me. But I think we all like to celebrate one another's successes. And even if someone doesn't want to celebrate your successes, they'll come and tell you, which is also great for the algorithm. So it's kind of those 3 things. It's like storytelling with facts and statistics and data. It's storytelling with a personal story, and then it's celebrating my own wins, or other people's wins actually works really well as well.
I would totally agree with that. It's quite humbling to know that the biggest post that I ever posted on LinkedIn was a post about my daughter and her first job in McDonald's, in her outfit, uniform, and she had to battle a bit of anxiety. She had to draw on some resilience, and it just went bonkers. Anything I put out about myself will always now be living in the shadow of that post, which is quite amusing. But Sarah touched on it a little bit, and you mentioned when you were talking about the motorsport element of this, that obviously you've got to raise cash, right? You've got to be funded, and you seem like somebody that is very good at partnership, building, relationships in the industry. Obviously, motorsport, you can't do this on your own. You need supporters, unless you just, fell out of heaven with a pocket full of, golden fairy dust or whatever it was. But it just doesn't happen, does it? So talk to me about profitable partnerships. How do you kind of get situations that are totally win-win for you and the partners that you work with?
Yeah, so I think a lot of that comes from experience, especially when we're talking about motorsport, because I feel like a lot of brands are wary of motorsport because there's been they often have tons of people coming to them going, I'm a racing driver, can I have some money? And this is essentially what I teach through Racing Mentor, is how to create those profitable partnerships for racing drivers. I teach them about sponsorship essentially. But I've been through a lot of different scenarios where I've tried to get a deal over the line, or I've tried to do something. I've kind of come to this realization, and it's probably not that big a realization, is that it's all about relationships. So as much as I can, try and sell something that is like, hey, you're going to get a bunch of return on investment because we're going to work together in these 3 ways. The things that now that I'm essentially selling or kind of working on people with is, how can I build a relationship with someone, like an individual within an organization, let's say, and essentially show them my value or the value of whatever kind of team or organization I'm working with. And that's now my starting point. So it's very rare now that I go out and do a bunch of like cold emails or something if I'm trying to get sponsorship or even sales, you know, as a freelancer, as a content creator. And I would say some of the most profitable partnerships that I've kind of created for myself or have fallen in my lap are ones with either communities and groups of people or events. So like I'm an influencer partner for the London EV show. Working with them has been really good because it's meant that I've been able to connect with exhibitors and people going along to the show in a way I might not have otherwise been able to. But it also gave me additional experience in hosting panels and all of that kind of thing. But then also with Everything Electric in another way as a panelist. So I'm very much one of those people that's like, I don't work for free because I've got all of this experience and all of this value. And I think this is, you know, something that women fall into the trap of, you know, well, yeah, I'll do it for free. Yeah, I'll do it for free. And then it's endless. So I'm very, very careful now about what I will do for free. So I will still go on panels and I will still moderate things sometimes for free, but it has to be this kind of, it has to be equal. I'm not just free labor. If there's a way that it's going to benefit me, then yeah, of course I'll do it. If I get to meet some cool people or get some direct introductions. And I think that was a huge lesson for me, maybe over the last 3 or 4 years, because I was basically saying yes to anything where I could be on stage or hosting something just because I needed, not necessarily the experience, because I've done a lot of that as a journalist, but I needed more kind of direct experience doing it within maybe more of like a B2B setting. So, you know, doing it as a business owner and as a influencer, which I'm not keen on that word, but I think I've got to accept it. So yeah, it's been a big learning curve to know like what is actually a profitable partnership when someone's asking me to work for free and what is someone trying to exploit me for free labor. And that's been a really hard thing to navigate because it's like, well, I want to do this, but I have to stand my ground sometimes and say, yeah, but I need at least expenses, please. Otherwise, you know, I'll just be traveling around the country and not making any money.
Yeah. Do you know what, Jess? It's so important. I think free does not always demonstrate value, does it? And what I'm finding, and I've found through both my working career prior to being self-employed and even now, is that sometimes when you give something away or somebody is going to do something for free, it doesn't have value and connection on both sides and therefore can go in a heartbeat. You know, there's no commitment to it. So in business now, I would typically go along that route. There's got to be some commercial agreement, even down to the expenses thing on occasions, just so that people buy in. I think it's a great principle that you've created there. I know Saz wanted to throw something in as well.
Yeah, throwing in the praise for a start, just to have the kind of guts and gumption gall to say, do you know what? I've earned my crust. You know, I have actually done enough free stuff now. The answer is no. And I've turned down a few this month alone on that basis, because whilst I work for an amazing company called Paythrough and brand awareness is good, when they're only inviting you because it's you, that's a different game. That's because you've earned that place. But at the same time, it's that symbiotic relationship I'm looking for. I'm completely with you. Is it going to be fun? Is it going to cost me anything? Can I at least cover my costs? And what will be the result? Is it, as you say, you have to think strategically here. And that's where the strategist comes out once again with you. Where does this pathway lead to? Is it a pathway I want to go down? Is it something that will bring me A, personal exposure, B, salary/fee, or will I just simply enjoy it? And actually sometimes on the EV Cafe, we have to make choices like that. We assess every single event we go to. And because the way we set the business up, it's very much about putting the money back into our growth and growing the community. That's what we do. So, you know, we have had to sing for our supper a few too many times. But, you know, now that we've got to the stage where we can start to be a little more conscious about our choices, it's been profitable, not just for our sponsors, but also us as 5 individuals that contribute our sort of free time to this. I love it. And it's really inspiring to hear you talk about it, because we've watched your journey just go skyrocketing now. I just loved it when that LinkedIn post came out that you're going back to racing and you're pulling together all of your skills. It's just this wonderful moment. Now we share a group. Is it a secret group? It's about to not be secret.
No.
I don't know if it's like a
I almost
fight
mentioned
club.
it earlier and I was like,
I know.
is it?
So we're on something called Women in EV, and please don't shut your ears, those who don't happen to identify as female, because what this is about is offering somewhere to sort of share and celebrate and highlight. So there's all sorts of jobs that get shared on there. There's lots of discussions that are had. And, I am going to go there with it. I still every week have a horror story to tell about something that happens in my world. What's it like in motorsport? What's it like over there, over that fence away from my software world? What's it like for you in motorsport with that whole sort of diversity and inclusion struggle?
Yeah, motorsport's quite strange in that it's very traditional, but there is a big push for diversity and inclusion. And I sit on the LGBTQ plus committee for the governing body of motorsport, and you see coming through that all sorts of kind of issues that are maybe coming up at the track, and people who aren't maybe acting in the spirit of motorsport and in the spirit of inclusion. But I would say for the most part, people in motorsport just kind of get on with it, and sometimes that's in a good way. Sometimes a lot of people will say to you, well, it doesn't matter who you are, if you can race, you can race, kind of thing. But obviously that then kind of erases some of the challenges that more diverse communities might have. So that's not always a good thing. But it is very much, people just kind of ignore you and get on with it a lot in motorsport in a way that maybe they don't in other industries. What I found really interesting about motorsport is it's not willing to change. It just kind of gets on with stuff in its own way. And as it becomes more diverse and more inclusive, it's just about seeing more diverse people at an event, for example. There's still a lot of work to be done, but there's often very little fanfare about it. Like, you'll get the small groups of people that are doing something a bit more exciting and a bit more fresh in terms of getting new people into the sport. But for the most part, everyone just kind of just does their own thing. It's very cliquey. So you might be able to do some great stuff with, within your championship and with the people there, and it might be super inclusive. But then the next weekend, there's another championship happening at that same racetrack where it's totally different and no one will speak to you. Or, someone will ask, are you with hospitality or are you PR if you're a woman? So it's really, really kind of siloed in terms of who is doing what. Some championships, super progressive. Others, like it has been for the last 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. So it's a really weird one. So it's very easy to get stuck in an echo chamber of going, motorsport's super diverse. People are doing stuff that's really cool. And then you kind of step out of that and you're like, oh, still so much work to be done. So it's very different to other industries. Whereas I feel like if you look at automotive as a whole, the e-mobility part is still talking to the, traditional motorsport part. And there's a lot more crossover in, diversity, inclusion, policies and what people are doing in that respect. Whereas motorsport, there's not. It's really strange.
So you think that there is a marked difference between e-motorsport and motorsport?
Yeah, so I think e-motorsport, whether that's scooter racing, Formula E, whatever it might be, tends to be a lot more inclusive because typically the people coming into it are either not from a traditional motorsport background or they are young. So they're already more used to a more inclusive world, or at least being conscious of inclusivity. But they're not the old guard of, let's face it, old white dudes who are, doing what they're doing in motorsport, that they tend not to move over to e-motorsport in that same way. So I think as electronic motorsport becomes more prevalent, beyond Formula E or beyond Extreme E or Extreme H or whatever it's going to be now, I think because you've got new people coming into it who are either of the electric persuasion, as we are, or are just younger, techier people, that's kind of, I think, where the big difference is. There's not this trickle down effect of traditional motorsport and this is how it's always been. It's fresh and new, and we can do good, more inclusive things with it.
Fantastic. It's great to see that you're able to influence from the inside out, in terms of bringing that inclusivity, the diversity, and really kind of making the world shine in a better way. Definitely. But Jess, I want to go back, and I want to go back a long, long way.
Maybe not that long, because we don't know much about
well, I mean, relative to your life, let's put it like that.
We know.
Yes. So you talked in that very post that Sarah mentioned about ADHD, and you got diagnosed in 2020, I think.
Yeah.
John Curtis, one of our own team, has also found that out, and also an element of autism. I think he's passed on the diagnosis to me that I'm likely to be ADHD, which is quite possible. Don't know why he thinks that. But yes, it is infinitely possible. But my point is that must have made your school journey not dissimilar to mine. I think you probably came through it a little better than I did. But in terms of that upbringing and early doors, how was that for you? How did it form you, and how did it shape your future? I mean, I know I saw drama in there, so you're into kind of being visible. But tell me about that.
I really hated school, and now it makes so much sense why. It just wasn't stimulating enough for me as someone who I wanted to learn things, but on my terms, and only the stuff that I was interested in. So anything that fell outside of that, no, zero interest. So I don't look back fondly on my school days. I was actually, even though I did drama and I did music, I was actually quite a quiet kid. I'm the typical, what you would see as, now what people understand as like a girl with ADHD, very much the daydreamer, always in my own head, doing my own thing, not listening to teachers. So I remember when I was 8 years old, one of my like parent teacher, conference things, my teacher said, Jess always looks like she's not listening, but as soon as I ask her a question, she'll answer it immediately without looking at me. That sums up basically until like mid high school of how I kind of operated. So like, I was very, very creative, enjoyed English much more than maths. So in a maths class, I was trying to write a novel at the time, and the teacher would always get so upset at me that she'd be like, what are you doing? Read it out to the class. And I would, with absolute glee, to the point where my entire class was then so hooked on, what this novel was, they'd all be like, can I read the next bit? And so it was very much I kind of did my own thing. And as I got into like more serious schooling, as in having to do my GCSEs, and then for some reason I went on to do A-levels, I was totally disengaged with the process. I skipped school a lot just because I was not stimulated enough by what was happening in school. But somehow, and kind of thankfully, I still managed to get decent enough grades to, continue on. Not that it really matters, because I didn't go to university and no one has ever asked about my GCSEs or A-levels. But yeah, I just hated the whole process. But now that makes so much more sense when we know that kids with ADHD tend to be not engaged by things that don't interest them. They need, a lot more stimulation in terms of the way they're taught. So like, I can watch something or listen to someone or go along to, a training session and learn from it. But I disengage with it very quickly if I think I already know it. So the amount of like business training things I've been on, and then I'm like, I know more than they do, which is half ego, it's half, ADHD. But I've found, and I've learned as an adult, that the way that I learn best is by doing something, and you never had that option in school. So sitting down and watching someone write algebra on the board, no, like let me sit down and do it myself. I don't want to go through it with you because I don't have the patience to watch it happen. So learning that about myself and knowing what I was like in school, now I feel like I'm in my learning era. Like I've just done a course on cybersecurity, and I love taught myself, Python and SQL, coding, because I now know how I learn. Also, I have ADHD meds, so we can't forget those. But because I've learned how I learn, I'm now suddenly able to go and do these things. Whereas previously I was like, I'm not a very good learner. I don't like learning, where that's not true at all. I love learning. I just never really understood that it could be more than listening to someone tell you something.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, in many respects, drama was one of those things because you could only learn by doing, really. I mean, yes, you could understand the theory and what's it called, the proscenium arch or something like that. I don't know. I forget whatever it was. But for me, that was immersive because that was the way I learned at school. I mean, I didn't make it out of school with any qualifications, and I didn't get my GCSEs, and I spent less time in school than out of it. But I'm not suggesting everybody is that way, and I was probably quite naughty as well at the same time. But it can be a formative year. How has that shaped who you are now? In the sense of, how did that create your journey to where you are now? Was it that focus on English and that love of the one thing that you loved within school then became the thing that overtook you, or?
Yeah, so it's two things. It's the English aspect. I always wanted to be a writer. I was writing for music magazines when I was 15, so I was technically a journalist then. So I've been a journalist for 20 years. So there was that, but then I was also very business minded. So I think when I was 6, I tried to sell leaflets on the street, not give them out, sell them, which my parents told me was illegal. So I then would go pick fruit from our garden and then sell that. I would put it on the front lawn with a sign saying for sale. So there's a very much a business minded thing there as well. And then I did business studies at A level, which again, I hated, because I was already working in the music industry at that point, because I've always thought, well, I'm going to do my own thing. I'm not going to wait for education, apparently. So I was already working in the music industry. I had to produce a business plan as part of business studies, and it got shot down. It was no, it's terrible. You're going to get terrible grades. And I think I maybe got a D in business studies. That business plan went on to secure the music company that I was working with, £250,000 in investment. And that was the nail in the coffin for formal education for me. I was okay, it's not real world. I think that was always my problem. Whatever I was learning in school, it wasn't real. And I think the knock-on effect for that for me as a person and as an entrepreneur is just go and do the thing and you'll figure it out. I'm very much a learn by doing. Yeah. And I know a lot of people go, well, okay, I want to do a thing. I'll go and learn how to do it and then I'll do it. I'm the other way round. I'll go do it, figure it out. Where are the gaps in knowledge? Then maybe I'll go learn something new. But not always. So I think it's really made me look at education and training from a very cynical point of view. I know that there's value there, but it's about not just blindly going into something and going, well, it must be valuable because it's school. When often it's not.
Well, and there's an acknowledgement there that school and the educational system as it stands isn't a cookie cutter thing, or it certainly shouldn't be, but it did used to be. I remember very clearly having my careers assessment, and I was going to either be a lighthouse keeper or a florist, neither of which has got anything to do with any of the stuff I excelled in. I'm that head girl A-star kid. I just loved school, and I had 3 jobs at the same time. I just loved it all. I still love it all. I'll take it all on. But the thing that I liked about school was the community element, the fact that you see people every day. You have your little close network, and then maybe it's a different network, and I've kind of carried that through. But yeah, it's a really strong message you're putting out here, which is just don't give up. Even at work, we get forced to do courses. When you said cybersecurity, I too have just sat my cybersecurity. I don't know if you've seen that meme of someone clicking through it as fast as they possibly could because they just want to get to the end. That was essentially me. You just passed with 70%. That's all I needed to do. Thank you. But the learning element as we get older, scientifically, from a sort of neurological perspective, is harder. It's harder to learn as the brain ages, as your world becomes more muddled and busy. So I love that you've kind of found this niche. You've carved this niche for yourself. And your own post, you said, I'm going back to motorsport. That is absolutely fantastic. I can't work out where music turned into motorsport. How did that happen?
This is very much I do what I want because I'm self-employed, and whatever I'm interested in is the thing. And that gave me the opportunity when I first started my business to figure it out. So previous to going self-employed, I was working in luxury PR. So it was like a lot of like interiors and beauty and that kind of thing. I was really interested in that. So when I started my own business, I did a lot within kind of like fashion and beauty. Music was very much a thing that I was into in like high school and college. So I did a little bit of that when I went self-employed, but I felt like you needed a lot more experience within it to be able to make really any difference. So I focused on fashion and beauty. Then it kind of very quickly turned to tech and motorsport, kind of two different streams that ran parallel. And
But how though, Jess? How? Where did it come from? You just fast car went past and you went, oh.
Okay, let me tell you the story.
I was hoping you were saying you were doing a DJ set at a motorsport event. That would have been amazing. DJ set, music, and then you're like, hang on, I want to be doing that. Yeah, no, sad.
No, it's actually, this is a good insight into how my brain works. So my partner, he is very into Formula One, has always been since he was a kid. I started watching it with him in about 2008 and got hooked on it. I was like, this is really cool. Jake Humphrey was the presenter for the particular broadcast we were watching. I thought, I love his style. He's making this so interesting and accessible for someone like me who's brand new to this. And I went, I want to do that. I'm going to be an F1 journalist. And then I did. And I just kind of figured out, again, strategist, I figured out how one becomes a motorsport journalist. I did do a bunch of work for free. But then, I was then a pundit for BBC and TalkSport, albeit just on the radio, covering like a race has just happened. Here's Jess to talk about, the specifics. And that was brilliant. As part of that, I met a lot of racing drivers at all levels. And I met one and we really clicked on a press event for, I think it was Vauxhall many, many years ago. She asked me to do PR for her because I came from this PR background. So she was essentially my first motorsport client. I was still doing fashion, tech, automotive, all this other stuff. So it kind of went from having this journalistic side, which meant I was invited to events, to meeting a racing driver at an event, doing PR for her, getting a lot of experience that way. Through her, I met the drivers who would ultimately become part of my Porsche racing team. At the end of that season, I realized that no one knew how to get sponsorship and I needed to set up my racing mentor brand to help people. And then that's kind of like where I am now with, various ups and downs of running a niche business within that.
See, my head's mildly blown here because I'm looking at this person that seems to have incredible capacity, to do things. And let's be, you've alluded to your age. Am I allowed to say what I've calculated your age to be?
Yeah, go for it.
35 or 36?
35.
Yeah, okay, so 35. 35 years old, self-employed for nearly 13 years, so that's 22. I mean, you have done a heck of a lot. Because I'm 56, right? I just decided 3 years ago that I would go self-employed. I probably should have done it like 100 years before, but I'm in awe, really. I genuinely am, and I just think I wonder what is your superpower? And I think you've mentioned that ADHD might be your superpower. Is that, and how does that work? How does it give you extra capacity?
Yeah, so it's definitely ADHD, but not necessarily because it's a superpower, but because I don't like being told what to do. So work in the same way that I didn't get on with school, working for other people, while I had some great jobs, great bosses, there was always this little part of me that was like, I could do this better. And as a kid, I was super ambitious. Like my grandma was a teacher and she was always very, very focused on, we're going to teach you everything. So I was like reading before I went to school. I had that privilege of, having people in my corner who wanted me to learn. Jokes on them. But I think I took that through my career. But the ADHD kind of made me go, I need to do things my own way. And it hasn't all been plain sailing. In fact, it's been really, really hard, especially undiagnosed and not knowing like why I felt this way, why I struggled with certain things. Like running my own business has been so stressful, and it's still stressful. But I think having a job, a proper job, would be so much more stressful, because I don't think I'd be able to exercise the same creativity that I do now. And working with clients, I feel, is very different, because I'm the one strategizing. I'm the one that can sit down and work out how I can collaborate with a client and do things in a way that suits everyone for the outcomes that we want. And I think that suits me so much more. And I think the thing that's kept me going, even when it's been tough, and actually this last year has been really tough for me and for my business, the thing that's kept me going is I don't want a proper job. I like the lifestyle I have, because I get to go to events and talk about things that I enjoy. I get to meet cool people. I can take Fridays off if I want, but I also get to do the work that I love. And that's the thing that keeps me going, because, I don't have to, work with people that I might not get on with. I can kind of pick and choose. And, I've got a fantastic team that work with me and who support me. And they this has been key actually with ADHD, is to find someone who can pick up the things that I either can't do, don't want to do, or forget to do. So I've got Rose within my team who is incredible for that. And that's made such a difference in terms of how much work I can get done and how enjoyable it is as well.
Amazing.
Absolutely loving this. Yeah, I think
I love it.
Even if ADHD is your superpower, I think it's actually the underpinning sort of principle is understanding how you tick, how you want to tick, and where you're going to tick-tock to. Ultimately knowing where you want to be with your role and your job. And I strongly recommend, I'm supporting a friend at the moment through, do they want to continue to climb the corporate ladder, or would they actually rather go alone again? There's so many benefits to both. And what I love about this podcast series, and thank you, Paul, for having me on, it's usually John Curtis and Paul Kirby, but actually more increasingly, I'm so loving being part of it, because I find our guests simply inspiring. I hope the listeners have too. And what you can take away from this episode is that if things don't go completely your way, it might not be you that's the problem. It could, in fact, be the pool you're swimming in. Secondly, learn your way of learning so that you can get your way out of that. But you can't do that without strategy. You can't do that without having a really clear mind about where suits you to go. And only then, when you've got that, you need the team around you to make it happen. I promised you, Paul, that Jess would make us smile and would be an excellent guest to be here. So from the bottom of my heart, Jess, thank you so much for being part of our collaborative EV Cafe podcast today.
It's been a pleasure. It's been so much fun. Thank you.
Well, it has. It's been so much fun. And I feel I just need to go away and have a good, cold, hard look at myself and find out, how on earth I can emulate certainly the way that you've been able to pivot and navigate and just go for the things that you love. And I desperately admire that. I think it's superb. You've just demonstrated that your core and your ability isn't measured by anything that's happened in the past. It's about you, in terms of schooling and that type of stuff. You have just kind of said, right, I'm going to cut my own furrow. I'm going to cut my own, blaze my own trail.
Or you'll be plowing a furrow or cutting some cloth. I'm not sure, one of the two.
Blazing a trail. Metaphors just merge. They're just, they're just words to be played with. But we should say that your business is called Jet Social. And you must reach out to Jess if anything, and also Racing Mentor. I think that still goes on alongside of your current business, and of course, it's about to be a team principal, or you are a team principal, but the season's about to kick off. So I'm really excited for what we're going to see from you, Jess, over the next year or two. Hopefully, you'll have some time to be still doing a bit of mentoring and a little bit of socialing through Jet. But Jess, thank you so much for giving us the time today and the insight. I think it will be a tremendous encouragement to many people listening to this from all aspects of our community. So thank you so much. Thank you. Listen, our pleasure. Really is our pleasure. But listen, if you've enjoyed this, there's many more podcasts. And Jess, she told us she's listened to some already. So they must be good. Yes. Some great people, inspiring just like Jess, and a real good example and one that we can learn from. So Saz, thank you for your company.
My pleasure, as always. Yes, I'd love to know who those ones were, Jess, and hopefully you'll dip into them more. And I cannot wait to come and see this racing. I've got to see it when it's up and running. I can't
You're
wait.
We
more
want
than welcome.
tickets.
Yeah,
Jess, we want
absolutely.
tickets. Somewhere nice, if you don't mind, please.
There's lots of nice places, definitely.
But Jess, thank you again for your time today. And we look forward to seeing what the future holds for you and for everything that you put your hand to. Very well done. So everybody, check out the EV Cafe website for all of the other podcasts. You can also check out our content there from webinars and so on. Also check in with us on LinkedIn and a little bit of YouTube too. Check out the news every Friday, and any other podcast will be announced every Wednesday. We look forward to seeing you again in the future. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye-bye.